started. Appreciate everyone coming. I know everything's running a little late, but that's the nature of these things. This is the media measurement paradox panel. I think it's going to be an interesting and informative panel for everyone to really understand this shift we're going through in terms of media, in terms of measurement, etc. My name is Andrew Brandt. I run a program at Villanova University in sports law and sports business. And I'm here with my students who are competing later today in the competition. And I have a background working with Green Bay Packers, being an agent, and working in sports media on ESPN and Sports Illustrated the last 15 years. I want our panel to introduce themselves. I'll give you the basic highlights. We have Megan from the Los Angeles, I was going to say San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers. Yeah, that's right. We have Jeff Ferguson from iSpot, and we have Scott Ehrlich from the Sinclair Broadcast Group. And what I want to do is, before we get into the meat of the panel, have each of them introduce themselves in ways much deeper than I have. And what I'd like you guys to do is talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this media measurement world, but also just instructive, a lot of young people here. Sort of where did you see your quote-unquote inflection point of your career, where you thought, wow, I can do this sports business thing, I can make it in this world? If there's a point where you, in your career where you felt like, I think that'd be instructive for the group. So just take a couple minutes, tell us who you are and that inflection point of your career, if you would. Megan.
I'm not great at heights. I'm Megan. I'm the director of social media and content performance at the LA Chargers. I think my role into like the content analytics and measurement portion is interesting. It's relatively new in terms of title. That's something I've been doing for years, just based on what my job is. I got my start at the San Antonio Spurs in 2014, so no, I don't have a ring. Just right after they won against the Miami Heat. Started as a social media coordinator, worked my way up to senior manager at the Chargers, and we started to realize that we needed to value our content differently to partners, internally, to stakeholders, to really show the value of what social was doing. So my team now has two sides to it, the organic social media side, which Hannah right here sits on, and then the paid social media and content analytics side, which Jack right here sits on. And that side is really kind of what I'll focus on today, but it's how we are measuring for internal stakeholders, showing our performance against other teams, but more importantly, how we price out our content for our partners and show the value of the social post, whether that's product integration or logo slab. I think this panel is really about how you value that and put a number or a price tag on it.
Inflection point?
Honestly, I always thought that I could do this. I'm not going to lie. But I think when they brought it up to me to take on the analytics and the paid social part of this job, I was like, dang, I made it. Like, I just created a job that didn't exist. No other NFL team has the paid social and their content analytics under their organic team but us. And I think that was my moment where I was like, oh, I can really like change this industry beyond what I've already done on the organic side. It gave me a little bit more longevity, right, to my career, my growth. I have more areas to grow in than just succeeding on the organic side.
So Scott Ehrlich, Chief Innovation Officer and Corporate Strategy for Sinclair Inc. Used to be the Sinclair Broadcast Group. We spent a year trying to think about what to change the name, and all we did was we dropped Broadcast Group. So we own or operate about 200 television stations, 4 over-the-air broadcast networks, cable channels, Tennis Channel, Partridge Territory. I think we have a llama farm in Buffalo, I want to say, and a few other random assets. Been in this business for a long time. So I started around measurement in the 90s. So my first network television job was NBC, working at a network called CNBC, which became NBC Cable later. And the measurement challenge we had at CNBC was more than half of our viewing was at home. It was stockbrokers who were watching bars in New York City and at lunchtime and in their offices, and there really wasn't a measurement for that. And so we had to figure out how to get paid for actually most of our audience, which Nielsen never measured or pretended to measure. We'll get into that later. But But I would say that the sort of singular moment I always look back on was early in my career. This was 1993 at NBC. I remember very clearly sitting in a meeting and looking around the table and going, "Oh my God, all of these people are terrified to make a decision." So if I just say blue, we're going to make it blue, would everybody else go along? Just I just wanted to sort of be the one to say, "Okay, we're going to go that way." What would happen? And so it was a social experiment, because I was a brash young kid. I just went, I think it should be blue. And then I watched everybody around the table go, "Yeah, blue, blue." He said blue. Just for a quick, he said blue. And we made it blue. And that was a really instructive moment for me early in my career. Was don't be afraid to make a decision. Don't be afraid to say your opinion. And good things happen after that. I mean, nothing good happened to me, but supposedly good things happen to other people after that. So that's my moment.
Cool. So Jeff Ferguson at iSpot TV, run business development at iSpot. iSpot measures television. So if you think of what Nielsen does in the marketplace, we have been doing that for a number of years, and a different approach to it, and really modernizing how TV is measured using smart TVs, ACR versus panel of TV households, which is quite important when you think about, I think, the topic of conversation I think we'll get into in just a minute, of how you bridge the gap between linear, traditional linear distribution television and OTA or streaming, whatever we want to call it, in the marketplace and how things are moving. I got my start in media back in the late 90s, working at Viacom on MTV, Nickelodeon, went to Discovery for a number of years. I would say my inflection point was somewhere around 2010, and really it's about the measurement side of things. We, as a TV network, were really managing or doing a good job, I felt at the time, and articulating the value of the consumer. We didn't really have a relationship with our consumer. And I think my inflection point came when I went over to the digital space. I worked at Facebook, Instagram for a number of years as well. And that is where you have that measurement, that one-to-one relationship with the consumer, and able to really fully, truly understand maybe value for brand advertisers when you have that kind of relationship with the consumer. So that was my journey, kind of got me back into television at iSpot about 6 years ago, and really taking what is a digital-first measurement approach and looking at television, which has been pretty powerful and something I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about.
I'll talk about it right now. I'll stick with you. I mean, I think that's kind of the genesis of what we're talking about here, and you just mentioned it. I think everyone, including myself, has this feeling about when we talk about media measurement, we're used to that one word, that one company, Nielsen. And we are in, you tell me, and all of you can answer this, are we in a post-Nielsen world, or are we in a world where Nielsen is simply a measurement, and we're getting more, and the idea of linear versus digital has changed the whole paradigm? Sort of where we stand today in this media measurement world.
Yeah, I probably won't use that company's name because we are direct competitors to the company. So
the N word.
Refrain from saying that company's name through the course of this at least start. So to answer the question, are we in a post
that word
measurement world? The answer is absolutely yes. At this point in time, we are working. A lot of the networks, broadcast networks, are looking for alternatives to that company for a variety of reasons. And I think one of the biggest reasons is this evolution of content and direct-to-consumer through a lot of the streaming apps that these broadcast companies have really gotten into. And to be able to properly measure both traditional linear distribution as well as streaming distribution is very difficult, right? So I think there's a couple companies out in the marketplace that are doing a good job. I think the broadcasters wanted some options to be able to present to the marketplace for brand advertisers to select their measurement partner that they think represents a true measurement. And so we've definitely shifted for those two reasons, just looking for alternatives, as well as the consumer paradigm has shifted. Streaming services have really grown tremendously, and brand advertisers are looking for those streaming services and requiring a new set of measurement capabilities in the marketplace.
Fascinating. And Scott, I guess the answer to the same question, but now we're going to bring in the world why we're all here, which is kind of sports, because you sort of layer this in with all the sports content, which is a whole nother level of content than pretty much anything else, correct?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll say the word Nielsen. We've somewhat publicly fired him twice, neither time successfully. The challenge with sort of moving to a post-Nielsen world is you have to get the buyers to go along, right? So at the end of the day, it's fine for us to take a stand and say we'd rather rely on ComScore and iSpot, which we would. But if the agencies aren't going to buy our stations because they're not Nielsen rated, then all we really did is shoot ourselves in the foot. And that's what's happened to us twice now when we've tried to move away from Nielsen is we couldn't get the advertisers to go along with us. And so when you think about sort of like how measurement evolves in the future, I think it's also important to think about how sales evolves in the future. So most of the planet sells advertising on an impression basis, right? One eyeball, one ad, one eyeball, one ad. In the US, we don't do that yet. Like we still sell a lot of, particularly in television, a lot of CPM-based, right, cost per thousand based sales. And they reconcile back to a rating, not an actual impression. And if you look at the evolution of media delivery, so start with digital, right? And I started in the internet when streaming started. I was a launch partner with Real Video in '97. And that was the promise, right? I was Fox at the time. It was like, okay, great. Now we have a way around Nielsen. We're going to know every person. We're going to know every click. And as it turns out, it's a lot more complicated than we thought at the time. And yes, it's more measurable. And yes, you have better analytics and all these other sorts of things. But at the end of the day, it is way more complicated than we thought it was at the time. And so moving away from Nielsen is something I think a lot of people aspire to do, not because of Nielsen. Nielsen is a good company, there's good people who work there, but their product is essentially a projection of how many people are watching. It's not actually a census of who is watching, how long they're watching, what device they're watching on, all of the data that we need now to get paid more money for those ads, right? We get paid more money for those ads, we know who's watching, what device they're watching, how long they're watching, all these other sorts of things. And so when you translate that and you sort of move over to sports, and I'll use Tennis Channel as the example, for a lot of reasons. Tennis Channel has a unique challenge, which is, so the back end of Nielsen includes a product called Graysnow, which most of you have never heard of, but Graysnow is the thing that provides the metadata for television shows. So they're the thing that powers your electronic program guide. So you see the show name and the show description. That all comes off of something called a TMS ID. TMS is Tribute Media Services, is what Graysnow was called before it gets bought. And the TMS ID or industry ID is sort of a code number that tells the Graysnow database exactly what episode of what television show is airing at 2 o'clock on this station. Populates the program guide, all the rest of that. Tennis is a unique sport. The tournaments are 2 weeks long. We don't know who's playing until the day before. There is no TMS ID. There's no standardized way to tell a program guide. So very often the program guide just says tennis. And it's actually Novak Djokovic playing in the final, but we don't know that until it actually happens. And so the challenge there is connecting the metadata back to the viewing data so that we're able to go back to an advertiser and say, this is how many people watch this match at this time on this platform. And the more that we splinter the way that we deliver those sports, the more challenging it gets. So Tennis Channel now, you could be watching that match on cable, because that's Tennis Channel's primary mode of delivery, but now we have T2, which is a fast channel. Fast is free, ad-supported streaming television, sort of linear channels that like on screens. We have TC Plus, Tennis Channel Plus, which is a subscription service that offers lots more matches and all this sort of stuff. And if somebody's running an advertising in one of those things, we're not able to give them a full picture of who was watching the match versus who saw their ad, how they saw their ad, where they saw their ad, what platform they saw their ad on. And all of those things are important because the more we know about it, the more we can charge for the ad.
Fascinating. And Megan, you have, it seems like you have a lot of masters. You have the advertiser, you have the people running the team. In terms of what you put out social for the LA Chargers, are you looking for what's going to get the biggest bang social? What's going to get the biggest bang advertisers? What's going to be more palatable to the general manager and the president? All the above. And what are your measurements?
I think that's the crux of social and why it's difficult. You have several audiences. The way we break it down organically is, yes, we have our internal team audience, but we have the audience of our fans who already exist, who are in our fold, who know our voice, who understand our team, know our players. And then we have an audience that we're trying to build, that we want to be Chargers fans or part of our core group of fans. We're trying to bring them in. So you're speaking to those two people, and then you're always trying not to upset anyone, including a partner or the GM. The last thing you want to do is be called to your GM's office the day after you posted a win meme, and you're like, hey, Tom. It's all fine that you're speaking to different people, but the way we measure things organically on social is we do sell based on impression model. So a lot of teams just sell like 8 episodes of this series, and this is what it costs. And we went back and we were like, okay, if it's 8 episodes of this series, but they're getting product placement and they're getting a set, how much can we raise that CPM to make that impression cost a little bit more? But then at the end of the day, it's like what necessarily works for Pepsi might not work for the LA Chargers. Pepsi's message is different. I'm just using Pepsi as an example. This is not based in reality. But what Pepsi wants might not be what our audience cares about. So how do we provide value to Pepsi while still bringing value to our fans? And I think there are some teams that will just sell out and be like, oh, well, Pepsi's paying us, or I'm going to stop saying Pepsi. McDonald's is paying us this amount of money. We'll do whatever they want. We don't do that, and because we don't do that, we had to find ways to show our partners the value in being associated with our brand. I have brands email me all the time, and like, is this okay if we post this about the Chargers? Like, do you like this copy? And I'm like, I don't care. That's your audience, your copy, that's not my business. And that's kind of how I see it, is if you want to be associated with the Chargers brand, you'll be associated with the Chargers brand in our way, obviously in a respectful way, and keeping in mind your partners and your competitors. But that's, I think, the bulk of my job now is finding out how to monetize such a very specific brand online. Like, we are who we are not for everyone, but there is value, I think, to any brand out there. It's my job to show that value.
Just a quick follow-up, because I left the world of running an NFL team before all the social media challenges that you have. What would be something, for instance, a general manager would not want to see, especially after a win or just a big play or a locker room celebration? Just a generic example, or
It's going to be a long list.
Surprisingly, the Chargers not that long of a list. They give me a lot of slack and a lot of rope and a lot of autonomy, and they understand the importance of social, which is great, which is why I work here. But I'll give one example. We did a win meme where we turned another team's logo into an L. And that other team reached out to our team. Our GM, they didn't like that very much, and that's fine. Now there's these two, there's a hard and fast rule. Don't turn another team's logo into an L. We don't have a lot of rules. That's one of the rules.
It feels like the sort of thing you don't know you've crossed that line until you've already
Until you cross it. Or I won't say the player, but there's a player who doesn't like his face photoshopped onto objects or animals.
Right.
So we don't Photoshop that man's face onto objects or animals. It all seems very minor and silly, but going back to your first point, everyone is looking for something different. I think that's the difficult part of social, and the problem in trying to show value in it, because different audiences find different value in different things.
Yeah, I mean, this is the age of the digital media director in sports, because we see the funny things with the schedule releases and interviewing the people who have no idea what these teams are, et cetera. That's always hilarious in my mind. Speaking of the NFL, Jeff, I wanted to get your opinion on something that actually a couple of the audience asked me about, in terms of the Nielsen, I'm sorry, that word.
You can say.
And I can say it. The measurement that was in the news recently regarding Amazon Thursday Night Football. So last year, Amazon's Thursday Night Football, for any other product, would be an incredible rating. I don't know, I think something like 9.5 million per week, but they felt Amazon was much more than that, and tried, I guess, you can explain it better than me, tried to do a different kind of reporting system and have that approved by a certain council. I guess it didn't work. So I guess explain to the audience again better than I did what that controversy was, where we stand with it, and what was really behind Amazon's push for different reporting.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the conversation we're having a minute ago with regards to the end company is really transacting and has been the de facto transaction organization for, since television pretty much started. And as we're looking at Amazon's Thursday Night Football, it's a different distribution model. And so that company was trying to square up their approach to measurement using traditional means and now incorporating actual direct data coming from Amazon and folding that into their measurement. The rest of the marketplace, a lot of broadcast networks were turning afoul. That was essentially like Amazon helping the end company grade its own homework. And there's a company, MRC, does accreditations and essentially validates methodologies for measurement. The MRC came in and stepped in and said that wasn't the approved approach. It's not dead completely, just something that they need more time to suss out the validity of how they're approaching that measurement methodology. So I think it's again, I think this panel is perfect timing. It just goes to show that we're in the midst of, as consumers are moving from traditional linear consumption means into these new environments. Thursday Night Football is a great example. Apple TV has the MLS rights. I think there's another couple NFL games that are going to be coming on the Super Bowl later.
We have an exclusive Peacock.
Yes, Chargers.
So all of this just means that the measurement hasn't caught up to essentially what the consumers are doing, where the franchises are moving many of their games, and we're in a really interesting situation right now with regards to, just to use the terminology in this session, transparency and accountability, and something that is appropriate both for the distributor as well as the brand advertiser. The brand advertisers are fueling a lot of money into these games to put their ads in there. They want to make sure that they're reaching the right audiences that they agree upon with the distributor, and that's getting very difficult today. It's not impossible, but methodology just needs to be something that everybody agrees upon. So it's like a currency, which is what they're transacting off of, and there just needs to be commonality and agreement from that standpoint.
Just one thing I'd add to that. Because I'm a little freer to say the N word, the Nielsen N word. So Nielsen has a product where they will measure consumption on connected TV. So if we have something that we stream, but somebody watches it on a connected TV, they can measure. It's an audio tone.
ACR.
Yeah. And so they're able to give us measurement for somebody streaming that show. And I think they try to use that product so that leaves out a lot of devices that Amazon still reaches. So it doesn't measure phones, it doesn't measure tablets, it only measures TV glass. And I think they tried to adapt that product and it didn't quite work. The other thing they keep in mind is, and I know this is shocking, but this is an industry that is full of politics. And MRC, I used to be on the board way back in the day, is a company that is primarily made up of broadcasters trying to oversee what Nielsen's been doing. And so it was a way to keep some balance in the force. And I don't know if they're streaming people on AMRC now, but back in the day, it was all broadcasters and cable networks who most certainly don't want to help Amazon. So just a couple of factors that might have played a little bit of a role there.
And just to clarify that, the reason you mentioned this, Jeff, the reason NBC, I saw Sean McMahon has had some really pointed comments, we're so upset about the Nielsen's own reporting was that they get better ad rates and potentially take away from NBC, CBS, ESPN. Why were the legacy networks so upset about this whole measurement?
Yeah, when it comes to, they're all fighting for the same ad dollars,
Okay.
right? So if you've got, use Pepsi, just because it's on mine. If Pepsi is selecting where to spend their ad money, they've got to, they may not have as much money to spend on every single game in the marketplace, so they have to start selecting which ones and which platforms to go with. They're looking for audiences, they're negotiating CPMs, cost per thousand, and that all comes down to, do we agree that this is going to be the audience that we're going to reach? The challenge that the broadcasters had, my understanding is that the numbers, the initial numbers that the end company had put out with regards to some of the Thursday Night Football games were slightly inflated, not inflated, slightly larger in certain demographics in co-viewing than every other game in traditional linear broadcast. So the question was, were we using two different methodologies to measure? And that's where they said we need to have some sort of, MRC accredited approach to it. Right.
There's also an undercurrent, as a broadcaster, I can tell you, there's also an undercurrent of, cool, glad you're fixing that. Can you fix television measurement? Because we've been paying you for that for like 40 years.
We can fix it.
I'm well aware of that. Thank you.
We work together, by the way.
I know.
Okay.
Full disclosure. Yeah, I mean, listen, like I said before, like if we could use iSpot data and ComScore data in the same way we use Nielsen data, our business would be better.
And Scott, talk about that changing business. I know there are things you can't say because there's lawyers around here on one. But to talk about the changing model with RSNs and video as a whole, compared to this new world that a lot of young people only know, which is streaming and direct to consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about it in terms of news instead of sports because that'll get me in less trouble.
Okay.
It used to be that appointment viewing meant you gathered a group of people around a television set to watch a program. That is no longer the case. Appointment viewing now means somebody's making a point to watch something at a time. Where they watch it, and to some degree when they watch it, are not flexible things that were never flexible before, right? I'm more than old enough to know, to remember when I had to get up and go across the room because my parents were getting off the couch to change the channel, right? And in those days, like if you wanted to watch the show that all your friends were going to talk about it in school the next day, it was at 8 o'clock, and if you went to the bathroom, you missed it, and that was the end of that. Now we have to meet consumers where they are, and that means a diversity of platforms. Now we used to live in a world where cable achieved well over 90% penetration in the U.S. It's now in the 46, 48% range. And that's a massive difference.
Amazing.
And so you hear the phrase cord cutting. That's the phrase I hear probably the most in life is cord cutting, cord cutting, cord cutting. Unless you go to Europe or South America or Asia where pay TV never achieved that level of penetration. So the way they think about cord cutting is very different than the way we think about it. Now, when you're building a platform, I don't care if it's cable TV or a streaming video service or something else, there's basically two types of content you have to think about when you're building the package. You need acquisition content, the content that's going to get people in the door, get them to change their behavior, put a dish on their roof, buy a piece of equipment they don't have, subscribe to something they don't subscribe to, versus retention content, which is the thing people actually use every day that gives them value to the service. Now that acquisition content is very rare, very precious, and really one could make a really good argument that it only exists in sports, which is why sports rates are so valuable, is to get people to change behavior from a media standpoint. And what you see now is people have changed behavior, and getting them to change back to a world where they just watch on TV, extremely difficult. And so the media companies, including ours, have had to diversify how we deliver our content, which means we've had to diversify our business models. And getting paid for 95 million cable homes is a lot better than getting paid for 46 million cable homes because you get paid per home. And so that fundamental change in the cable business is kind of the first domino that knocked over everything else. And so everybody who used to get paid for 90 plus million cable homes, that's ESPN, that's the RSNs,
Right.
that's CNN, that's everybody, has now had to find another way to get paid to make up for what was becoming just a giant gap. And the first thing you have to do is not lose the audience. And so the approach to that has been everything from direct to consumer streaming offerings to free streaming offerings, etc. Not even sure if I answered your question.
No, that's right. That was all part of that
All right, cool.
deal that we talked about that got resolved first weekend of September with the Charter versus Disney dispute that resolved hours before the Monday Night Football opener.
Yeah, shockingly.
Deadline.
Shockingly.
Something
But I think that's an interesting thing, because that's the first step in rebundling. Like, people love the bundle.
Right.
The bundle was a good deal for most people. It got expensive, but for most people, it was still more efficient than buying each of those parts on its own. And if you go buy the streaming services on their own, that's up to a lot more than you were paying.
It'll add up. Yeah.
But I think the hidden thing in that Charter deal was they got wholesale pricing to the streaming products. And so that's the first step in rebundling, but it'll be a different kind of bundle.
Quick show of hands. How many in this room do not subscribe to any cable service? Yeah, that's where we are.
I have 3, so 2 people can put their hands up.
Last question for me, then I want to open it up. We have a little bit of time for questions. And this is an easy question. Twitter, X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Your preferences, what's more valuable, what drives more content, what drives more ad value to you? Any of those?
Yeah, Facebook Meta remains the main one for partner dollars, whether that's us opting into their monetization services or us monetizing content on Instagram and Facebook, or for us running ads for our partners from our lens on those platforms. They have the most robust tools available and the best targeting and the best data available for that. X, Twitter, it's Twitter, it'll always be Twitter in my heart. Not as much. It is not as robust. The targeting abilities aren't there. Your CPMs are more. Your click-through rates are more. TikTok, I feel like advertising is in its infancy still, right? It's new, but the value there, I think, is where the value is going. Like, TikTok Shop is insane. Like, the things that TikTok is able to do, they've integrated with Ticketmaster. We can run straight to Ticketmaster ads on our TikTok account, things that we didn't have in the infancy of Meta or Twitter or any of those other platforms. But I think ultimately, in terms of like making money and for partners, YouTube is king because it's the most consistent social platform that exists. It operates in the point of viewing. Like on our YouTube channel, we post at the same time every single day. The same 4 times on Shorts, the same 4 times on Feed. I literally tell my social staff not to do that on our other channels. It should not be programmatic. I think that is the problem with advertising on social, is that it's not point of viewing, it's not as structured, it's not, this is exactly what you're getting. I go and make estimates for partners, I'm like, hopefully this gets 5 million, and I go to Jack and his team, I'm like, we have got to boost this, because we did not hit our impressions. Like, your social is not consistent. And again, it's all based on projection, right? So that's what we're doing, we're projecting, and then we're making good where we need to make good. But I think in terms of digital advertising, I think TikTok owns the future of that. And I would see more companies ad dollars going towards Twitter or going towards TikTok than I did going towards Meta in the next 5 to 10 years.
Got a little bit of time for questions. Anyone? Yes, sir.
You just mentioned, but is it because the attention span of the potential customers is so short?
Yes, and I also think that that's where the younger generation is going, and that's where ad dollars always tend to go, is where the next group of people is going. But I also think TikTok does a good job of making their ads feel like organic to the platform. I mean, I'll be watching, like, I didn't even know, but now I'm buying these products, right? It has completely changed the influencer space in a way that I never thought was possible, and made these influencers who on YouTube and Instagram seemed very inauthentic. Now they seem like these authentic people that I trust, and I'm over here clicking TikTok shop for a hairbrush I don't need. I just think it is meeting, like you said earlier, meeting people where they're at. I think that's what TikTok did. It found a way to meet consumers how they want to consume content and entertainment.
The new direct response
Yeah,
era.
yes, definitely.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
How often do you get to work with partners on the social media companies like TikTok and YouTube to figure out what's the best way to, quote unquote, game the algorithm?
Pretty often, we have a unique kind of philosophy where I'm involved in the pitch process early. Our social team is involved directly in our pitch process. So if we have a partner coming in and they want branded content, we're going to work directly with that partner, typically through their agency, right? So like American Airlines, we work through their agency. I think the other thing in the social space that we're starting to dive into is like how are we leveraging influencers and working directly with influencers, not to post content on our feeds, but to post content about us on their feeds. We have an entire influencer suite at Chargers games that is right next to the Chargers tunnel, and that to me is also part of the future of advertising. And then it's like, how do you measure that, right? Because you're measuring their audience. I need to go see their data. I don't know how our content is going to perform on their feed. It's a lot of projecting. It's a lot of math, which is not my thing. But it's really trying to leverage like how can the Chargers working with this influencer be beneficial to this brand. So it's no longer just one-to-one. You're adding a third layer in there, and then ultimately, hopefully, that product is seen as more authentic and consumable by your audience.
I have a quick question for you, Megan, as well. When you have a big play in a game and a touchdown in the second quarter, can you put up that highlight on social, or are you limited by NFL rules or the networks?
This is such a good and loaded question. The league does have policies and rules like about how many highlights we're allowed to post per game on our feeds. And that's all really because of the broadcast partners, right? It is in the best interest of the NFL to protect our biggest moneymaker, which is broadcast.
Media, yeah.
Yes, exactly. We cannot sponsor single play highlights, but we can sponsor all around their content. So I couldn't take a Keenan Allen touchdown and just like throw a logo on that because that's broadcast footage that is owned by the broadcast partner. But there are other things that we can do, like we sponsored Mic'd Up, series of sponsors, there's a ton of gameplay Mic'd Up. It's just about figuring out how to work within those rules and those guidelines that are set by the NFL right now. We don't monetize on TikTok. Hopefully, eventually we will. As you said, there's a lot of politics involved in the space. So there's a lot of factors at play, but it's my job to work within those rules and figure out what is monetizable.
But from a tool set standpoint, things like, Mocha, Tagboard allow you to take that in real time and sling it to serious social networks. And that used to be really hard.
It did. And I will say when I was at the NBA, we had a system where it was like AI. It would mark, I had all dating rates 3-pointers and just churn it out for me. At the league, we are still clipping a little bit more on our own. Like it's coming into the back end of Twitter Studio or X Studio, we're clipping there. But it's literally immediate. Like we are getting that up immediately after it happens, which is huge.
No more questions. I know we've run late. We're getting in the lunch period. Jeff Ferguson, Scott Ehrlich, Megan Julian, thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for a great call. Appreciate it.